I knew the price was too low for a 3-bedroom in this market. The realtor, a nervous guy named Steve, kept checking his watch during the tour, standing by the front door like he was ready to bolt. But I was 24, broke, and desperate to stop renting. I signed the papers on a Tuesday. By Friday, I realized why Steve didn't want to linger. The house had a smell. Not mold or rot, but something like stale pipe tobacco mixed with copper. It was faint during the day, but intensified after sunset. I spent the first weekend scrubbing the walls with heavy-duty cleaner, trying to kill the odor, but it just seemed to get stronger, like I was agitating it. The real issue was the basement door. It was a solid oak slab located in the kitchen, totally mismatched from the rest of the interior. The strange part was the hardware. It had a heavy-duty iron slide bolt installed on the kitchen side, not a lock to keep people out of the basement, but a lock to keep something inside. I laughed it off as the previous owner being paranoid about break-ins. I left it unlatched because I was moving boxes down there. That was my mistake. On my 4th night, I woke up at 3:33 a.m. The house was freezing, despite it being mid-July. I could see my breath misting in the air above my bed. Then I heard it, a slow, rhythmic dragging sound coming from the kitchen. Scrape, step, scrape, step. I grabbed the baseball bat I kept under the bed and crept into the hallway. The smell of tobacco was so strong now it made my eyes water, thick enough to taste. The kitchen was dark, lit only by the amber glow of the street lamp filtering through the blinds. The basement door was wide open. I knew for a fact I had closed it before bed. Standing in the doorway was a man. He was facing away from me, looking down into the darkness of the stairs. He wore a flannel shirt that looked stained and stiff. "Hey!" I shouted, my voice shaking more than I wanted it to. "Get out of my house!" The man stopped. He didn't turn around. He just tilted his head back at an unnatural angle, audible popping sounds echoing off the tile. A low, wet gurgle came out of his throat. Then he took a step backward, descending into the basement without looking. I didn't wait to see him come back up. I ran out the front door, drove to a motel, and called the realtor the next morning. Steve finally admitted the truth. The previous owner hadn't just died in the house. He'd barricaded himself in the basement for 3 weeks before passing away. But looking back at that slide bolt on the kitchen side, I don't think he was trying to keep people out. I think the family was trying to keep him from coming back up. I bought the house in October of 2019. It was a foreclosure in a decent neighborhood outside of Cincinnati, a single-story ranch built in the late 70s. I'm a contractor, so the water damage and peeling wallpaper didn't scare me off. I figured I could flip it in 6 months. The layout was simple, or so I thought. I was framing out a new closet in the master bedroom when the math stopped making sense. I measured the interior wall of the bedroom at 12 feet. Then I went into the hallway and measured the corresponding wall on the other side. It was 16 feet. I checked the blueprints I'd pulled from the county records. The prints showed the bedroom and hallway sharing a flush wall, but according to my tape measure, there was a 4-foot gap sandwiched between the studs that shouldn't exist. I assumed it was a chase for HVAC ducts or plumbing that wasn't on the plans. I grabbed a stud finder and ran it along the drywall in the hallway. It didn't beep for wood studs. It just signaled solid mass, then empty space, then mass again. Curiosity got the better of me. I took a hammer and a drywall saw and cut a 6-inch inspection hole right in the center of the gap. The air that rushed out wasn't dusty like a construction void. It smelled sour, like wet wool and ammonia. I clicked on my DeWalt work light and angled it into the hole. It wasn't a utility chase. It was a finished space. There was 1970s shag carpet on the floor. I widened the hole enough to stick my head through. The space was narrow, maybe 3 feet wide and 10 feet long. At the far end, there was a sleeping bag rolled out on the floor. It looked flattened, used. Next to it was a stack of water bottles, the plastic yellowed with age. But the thing that made me freeze was the ward to my left. It was the back side of the bathroom vanity. The drywall had been cut away to expose the back of the mirror. The silvering on the glass had been carefully scratched away in 2 small circles, right at eye level. If you stood there, in that hidden gap, you could look directly into the bathroom. I pulled my head out and backed away, my heart hammering against my ribs. I was the only one living there, but I suddenly felt incredibly crowded. I grabbed my phone to call the police, but then I heard it. A soft, dry cough. It came from inside the hole I just cut. I didn't pack a bag. I ran out the front door, got in my truck, and drove to a motel. The police searched the place an hour later. They found the hidden room, the sleeping bag, and the peepholes, but the space was empty. The only thing they found was a loose floorboard in the hidden room that led to the crawl space under the house. The foundation vent had been pushed out from the inside. I sold the house to an investment firm 2 months later and never stepped foot inside again. The first thing you noticed about the duplex on Elm Street was the sound dampening, or rather, the lack of it. It was an old Victorian conversion in Cincinnati, and the landlord, a nervous guy named Miller, gave me the bottom unit for $600 a month. He explicitly told me the upstairs unit was currently unlivable and would remain vacant for at least 6 months while he secured a contractor. That's why the footsteps started bothering me around week 2. At first, it was just the house settling, or so I told myself. But then the dragging sound started. It sounded like someone pulling a heavy suitcase across the hardwood floor, directly above my bedroom, every night at exactly 3:15 a.m. I called Miller. He swore nobody was up there. He even showed me the key to the upstairs unit, hanging on his office wall, covered in a layer of grime that suggested it hadn't been touched in years. The breaking point was a Tuesday in November. I was sitting at my kitchen table with just a desk lamp on, reviewing some files for work. Above me, the footsteps were pacing back and forth, fast, angry. I grabbed a broom and banged the handle against the ceiling. "Keep it down!" I yelled, feeling ridiculous for shouting at an empty room. The footsteps stopped instantly. The silence that followed was heavy, the kind that makes your ears ring. Then a slow, rhythmic scratching started. Not on the floor above, but inside the wall right next to my head. It sounded like fingernails digging into drywall. Scritch, scritch, scritch. My stomach dropped. I backed away, grabbing my car keys off the counter. As I reached the front door, I heard the upstairs unit's door slam open, then heavy thuds coming down the shared staircase. The sound was wet, like bare feet slapping against concrete, moving with impossible speed. I didn't wait to see what it was. I bolted out the door, jumped in my Civic, and sped off. I slept in a Walmart parking lot that night with the doors locked. When I went back the next day with my brother to pack my stuff, we found the door to the upstairs unit wide open. Against my better judgment, we went up. The place was empty. No furniture, no renovation tools, just thick gray dust covering the floors. But in the middle of the living room, directly above where my kitchen table sat, the dust had been disturbed. There were dozens of footprints. They were small, child-sized, but there were too many of them, and they were all circling a single spot on the floor, over and over again. I broke the lease that afternoon. Miller didn't ask for a cancellation fee. He just looked at the photos I took of the footprints, his face pale, and handed me my security deposit back in cash. As I walked out, he muttered something I'll never forget. "I changed the locks 3 times, he whispered. I really thought that would keep them out." It wasn't the sound of the door opening that woke me up. It was the sound of the lock sliding back into place. I was staying at my aunt's place in Dayton while she was in the hospital for hip surgery. It's one of those older ranch-style houses from the 50s with wood paneling and the smell of stale cigarette smoke that never really leaves. The basement was unfinished, just a concrete box filled with old holiday decorations and a washer-dryer setup from the Reagan administration. My aunt was adamant about one thing: keep the basement door locked. She told me the latch was faulty and the draft would blow it open, letting the heat out. She even had a heavy-duty brass slide bolt installed at the top of the frame, well out of reach of a child. The first 2 nights were fine. On the 3rd night, Tuesday, I was in the living room watching highlights on my phone. The house was dead quiet. Then, from the hallway, I heard a distinct metallic clack.
It sounded exactly like the slide boat moving. I muted the phone. I walked to the hallway. The door was shut. I looked up at the bolt. It was slid home, locked tight. I figured it was the house settling, or maybe the pipes banging. But the feeling of being watched started then. That prickling sensation on the back of my neck you get when you know you aren't alone. I went to bed around midnight. At 2:14 a.m., I woke up to that sound again. Clack. Then the squeal of hinges. I froze. My bedroom door was cracked open, giving me a sliver of a view into the hallway. The floorboards creaked, slow and rhythmic, but the pressure sounded wrong. It didn't sound like footsteps. It sounded like weight shifting on hands and knees. I grabbed the baseball bat I kept under the bed and stayed perfectly still. Through the gap in my door, I saw the hallway light from the kitchen catch something on the floor. It was the basement door. It was swinging open, but nobody was standing there. Instead, a hand reached out from the darkness of the stairwell. It was pale, gray almost, with fingers that looked too long and had too many joints. It gripped the doorframe, knuckles white. It wasn't pulling a body up the stairs. It was slowly, carefully, pulling the door shut. Then came the sound that made me leave. Clack. It locked itself in. I didn't investigate. I smashed the window in my bedroom, climbed out onto the lawn, and called 911 from my car. The police cleared the house. They found the basement door locked from the inside. Nothing was down there but dust and boxes. My aunt sold the house a month later. She never told me why, but when I helped her move, I noticed something on the inside of that basement door. Deep scratches around the slide bolt, the kind that would take years to carve.
I've worked residential construction for 10 years. You get used to weird noises in old buildings, pipes banging, wood settling, raccoons in the attic. You learn to ignore it. But what happened in a split level off Route 4 in 2018 wasn't the house settling. My boss, Gary, bought the place cheap. It had been empty for a year after the previous owner passed away inside. We were doing a full gut job. It was a Tuesday, late October. Gary had taken off early, leaving me to finish framing a closet in the basement. It was around 7 p.m. The sun was down, and I was working under a single halogen work light. The rest of the basement was pitch black. I turned off my circular saw, and the sudden quiet was jarring. My ears were ringing, but underneath the ringing, I heard footsteps directly above me on the main floor. They were slow, deliberate. Thud, thud, thud. "Gary?" I called out, assuming he forgot his phone. The footsteps stopped, right above my head. I waited, wiping sawdust off my forehead. The floorboards above creaked, like weight was shifting from one foot to the other. Then a drag, like someone pulling a heavy bag across the hardwood. I walked to the stairs. "Gary, quit screwing around, man." I started walking up. The basement stairs were open, just wooden treads without risers. As my head cleared the floor level, I looked down the hallway toward the kitchen. The lights were off upstairs, but the street lamp outside cast a pale orange glow through the living room window. Standing at the end of the hall, facing away from me, was a figure. It looked like a man wearing a gray cardigan. He was just standing there, staring at the blank wall. My throat seized up. I couldn't make a sound. I just stood on the stairs, frozen, clutching my hammer until my hand cramped. The figure slowly turned its head. It didn't turn its body, just the neck, twisting way further than it should have been able to go. I heard the dry snap of cartilage. The face was completely smooth. No eyes, no mouth, just pale, flat skin. I didn't scream. I scrambled backward down the stairs, tripping over my own boots, hitting the concrete floor hard. I left my tools. I left the lights on. I ran out the basement bulkhead door and didn't stop until I was in my truck with the doors locked. I told Gary I got sick. I refused to go back inside alone. We finished the job, sold the house, and moved on. About 6 months later, I saw a post on a local community forum. The new owner was asking if anyone knew the history of the house. She said her 3-year-old son kept talking to the smooth man in the hallway. She said the kid would wake up screaming because the man wouldn't stop smiling, even though he didn't have a mouth. Thank you all for watching and making it this far into the video. Please remember to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.